Big thanks to our guys over at Ambush Sports Network for all their support. Check them out at Ambush Sports on Twitter for everything from MMA to golf and everything in between. Joining me today is the pride of Michigan, number 11 ranked UFC bantamweight, Cody Stamman. Cody, how are you?
I'm great, man. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time, like I said. So, Cody, growing up, you were in wrestling, and in high school, you began to box. This is before the state had introduced MMA. Where were you first able to watch the UFC, and when was kind of your first introduction into MMA?
I started watching the WEC. I was a huge, like most guys my size, big Uriah Faber fan growing up. But I really didn't have any, I'd watch it. I really didn't have any goals. Like, I didn't really want to be a fighter. I didn't really care about, uh, like being an athlete that much. Um, after I finished boxing and wrestling, I was pretty much done with it. But a couple months went by. There was a local MMA event. I went and watched it, and I watched the guys fight, and I was like, man, these guys really aren't that good. I think with my background, I could probably whoop these guys' ass, and so I did, and now we're here. 10 years later, I'm beating guys up for money.
Yeah, it's a good way to get introduced to it is exactly looking at that and saying, hey, you know what, I could do this, and not only could I do it, but I could do it better than them. So, good on you for having that confidence prior to even having your first fight. Growing up, were you playing other sports at the time, or was mixed martial arts in some sort kind of what you had always been involved in?
No, I played football. I ran track. I wrestled. I boxed. I played rugby. I played a ton of sports. I just like competing. I just really enjoyed. I enjoyed being an athlete. Growing up. So if I never really focused that much on one sport. So I wasn't like a super great amateur boxer or a really great football player. Not to mention that I'm 5'6", so I was never gonna play in the league. But I guess looking back, it was great because it made me the athlete that I am today. I don't think I would be if I'd been so self-centered or focused on just wrestling or just boxing. I think the best guys coming up are the guys that are multi-sport athletes. They're just more coordinated. They take on stuff faster, and I'd like to think that I'm one of those guys.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's kind of nice, and it goes across the board in all major sports. I think when you do look at the guys who are at the peak and at the top of it, oftentimes it wasn't just their sole focus was on that one sport. Like you said, to be able to build the coordination and whatnot throughout other sports is something that I think is very beneficial to them. So after high school finished, you went on to wrestle at Grand Valley State University. And what was that experience like, being able to stay so close to home and continue competing with wrestling?
I practiced in Grand Valley and I wrestled a couple open tournaments, but I didn't actually wrestle with them. I guess I kind of got. I don't really know that all started. I'm not really sure where. I mean, I guess you could say I was on a team, but Grand Valley's team is a club team, so it's not. It wasn't like the competitive wrestling atmosphere that I would say like a Division I guy would get into. But I definitely learned that I did not want to wrestle anymore. I wasn't going to put the effort into being a superstar in wrestling anymore. Like once I started boxing and once I got into MMA, wrestling kind of took a back seat. Obviously, I still use it a little bit in my fights, but I like the mix. I like everything in combination a lot more than just the wrestling aspect. So, like I said, once I was introduced to MMA, wrestling really took a back seat to other disciplines like boxing and jiu-jitsu and kickboxing.
Yeah, and as we do talk about wrestling, I think people seem to finally be giving wrestlers and wrestling in MMA the respect that they deserve. And guys like DC and Henry Cejudo being former Olympians, they've obviously helped with that. We can even look at today, Beat the Streets is going on, and Ben Askren and Jordan Burroughs are going, which is very, very interesting to see. And do you think that wrestling has kind of become a very base foundation for guys that are getting into MMA and guys that are becoming champions?
Well, listen, I mean, if you can control where the fight ends up, you got a huge advantage. If you got a guy that's a super, super good striker, you put him on his back, he might have absolutely no idea what's going on there. So you can really beat guys just as a wrestler in fighting, I think, more than with any other discipline. I see good wrestlers beat good jiu-jitsu guys. just because they're positioning and control. I think wrestling, one, for the mental aspect, that it's really hard. It's the hardest sport I've ever done. And the fact that, you can control where the fight ends up, that's such a huge, huge, huge part of being a fighter, being able to control where the fight takes place. That is just such a huge advantage, and you see it now. Most of the UFC champions right now are all wrestlers. They all started with a wrestling background, and I think that shows that wrestling is the most dominant discipline in MMA.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The way, like you mentioned there, you're kind of able to immobilize an opponent from whatever it may be that they're very good at if you're able to influence and to be able to impact your strategy on them. And when wrestling is that strategy, like you said, it can kind of stalemate some of their other techniques. So I fully agree with you in the fact that it's building those champions exactly like you said. You can look from top to bottom in every weight class, and the guys that are up to top tend to be those wrestlers. So when you did start competing in MMA, you put together an unbelievable amateur career before you were going pro. And since you've gone pro, you're 18-2 with an asterisk beside the 2 because I went back and I watched that fight again, and you should be 19-1 for sure. So how have you been able to continue pushing your limits and building yourself as a fighter when you haven't really had too many setbacks and instances where you haven't done enough to secure those wins?
Well, I mean, in my amateur career, if I'm being fair, a lot of the guys I was fighting really didn't belong in a cage with me. I was like a guy that was taking it serious, and I was just going out there and dusting hillbillies and at like a skating rink, because Michigan MMA was like the wild, wild west back in the day. Honestly, I bet you 10 of my 20 amateur fights, I don't think went past the 30-second mark. Like, I would just walk out there, kick a dude one time, hit him one time, and it was over. Like the level was just clearly a lot different. But as a pro, I think the reason I've been successful is just because I constantly put myself in bad spots, and I'm super critical of myself. I don't really I'm never really happy with what happens in the cage. I can't really go back and think about a fight where I was like, wow, I did exactly what I knew that I could do in that fight. I've really never had that experience. Every single time I fight, I'm watching my fight. I'm really not that thrilled with what I'm doing. So I feel like I always have a lot more to learn. And I think that's the reason I've been successful as an athlete, because I don't really bring my ego into my training.
Yeah, and you lead me right into what I was going to ask you next, is that right after your last win at UFC 235, where you beat Alejandro Perez, you said that you were unhappy with your performance. And although that was directly after the fight that you were saying that, I'm sure you've been able to go back and watch it numerous times yourself. And you said you would probably beat yourself up over that performance. And how do you feel about that fight now that you've had the time to be able to go back and watch over it?
I still feel like I really was hitting on 5 out of 8 cylinders. There's a lot of stuff I could have done in that fight that I didn't do. I feel like there's a lot of times when I could have pulled the trigger and I didn't. So looking back, taking a fight against a guy who hadn't lost in 5 years and was the Ultimate Fighter winner on a 3 weeks notice, that was super super dangerous. So I'm always thankful to come out victorious without any injuries. But I want people to see the best of me, and I want to be that guy. I want to be mentioned in those conversations about who's going to be the next guy coming out making a run for the title. I want to be one of those guys. So in order to be one of those guys, you got to decisively beat people, and I just didn't really feel like I did that March 2nd.
Yeah, and Cody, when you do look at your weight division now, obviously you see the title kind of being tied up, and with Henry Cejudo going for that champ that has become such a regularity across the board in all weight divisions. What do you think of it when guys are coming up or moving down in a weight class in the pursuit of a title? Do you think that it ties up the division too much, or is it something that you're a fan of?
No, I mean, I feel like Henry Cejudo deserves that shot. Obviously, Marlon, he deserves that shot. But the problem at Bantamweight is that there's so many good guys. There's so much talent. It's so deep. So at any given time, there could be 5 different dudes that, could potentially be fighting for that belt, because they're all on winning streaks. They're all beat, tough opponents. So that's where you run into like these log jams in the weight division. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think that's why people want to watch it, is because there's so many guys that are so talented and that have that knockout threat, or that, guys that can just string wins together. I think that makes for a better uh, spectator sport, in my weight class.
Yeah, and when you don't have a fight upcoming, or say that you are just in training, are you one of those guys who is watching the events consistently week in, week out, or are you somebody who tunes in when the UFC does have an event?
Yeah, like I said, I don't have a lot of friends, so yeah, I watch a lot of fights. I'm kind of kidding, but no, I am a huge fan of MMA. Like, outside of just being an athlete, I think I'll always be a fan of the sport. So I watch my weight class a little bit more closely, but I watch all the fights. Every weekend I watch fights, and like pretty much every day, I bet you I watch an hour of fighting, whether it's boxing or wrestling or some kind of, like, studying opponents, studying, previous fights, looking at matchups that are coming up. I'm always watching fighting.
Right on. Is there anything in the upcoming weeks? Obviously, 237 goes this weekend. Is there any fights that you're really looking forward to over the next little bit?
I mean, I definitely want to see that June card in Chicago. I don't know what. Is it 238 with Cejudo and Marlon, and then Sterling and what's his name? I'm just drawing a huge blank here. Riviera, Peter Yan, yeah, Munoz and Sterling. Like, that's a huge card. That's a lot of, that's like 6 guys in the top 10, 5 guys in the top 10, including a title fight. So that's going to be something I'm going to be watching super, super closely. But, I think I'll be fighting, more towards the end of June. It's been like, verbally, we've talked about it. Rob Font and I will fight at the fight night card in Greenville, South Carolina. I can't officially announce anything and say if the fight's going to happen, but I'm pretty sure that him and I are going to be fighting. So that'll be another, top 15 fight in June. So there's going to be a lot of stuff happening in the bantamweight division, over the next month.
Awesome. And yeah, I was just going to get to that. The last thing that we'll touch up on here is exactly coming out of 235. You said that you were feeling very hungry and you were very healthy and waiting to get right back into the octagon. So saying that you're going to be in that late June matchup with Rob Font, is that something that you and your coaches are already starting to dissect and starting to look at how you will approach that fight? Is that how confident you are that it'll happen?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, I literally dissect every single guy in my division, so that way when I get that phone call, I kind of already know whether I'm going to say yes or no, like whether it's a good fight, good matchup, bad matchup, whether the timing's good, whether it's the right fight at the right time. I'm always thinking about this kind of stuff. So, Rob Font has been a guy that's kind of been on my radar for months now. I mean, I thought maybe I was going to fight him at that UFC Nashville card, but then I got the call to fight Alejandro Perez. So this is a guy that I've been studying for a long time, and I'm really, really lucky that I have a lot of guys, a lot of boxers in Detroit that can emulate what he does really, really well.
Right on. That's awesome to hear. Well, again, Cody, thank you very much for your time. It was fun chatting with somebody who's at such a high level as yourself. I think you're somebody who over the next year we could really see taking that step and starting to get into that title shot contention. So I'm really excited to see you. Hopefully that fight gets confirmed very shortly and we can confirm that we'll see you in Greenville.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. That's Cody Stamman, everybody.